Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of Matthew. We began yesterday looking at Matthew chapter 19, the first 12 verses or so, in which Jesus had asked a question about the grounds for divorce. The Pharisees had asked Jesus, is it permissible for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Now, what they were doing was trying to involve Jesus in a contemporary debate of two schools of interpretation. One school said, well, Moses allowed divorce for any reason in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Another school said, no, Moses only allowed divorce for immorality or adultery, according to Deuteronomy 24. And they were trying to involve Jesus in that debate and get him to side one way or the other, and whoever belonged to the other school would turn against Jesus. But Jesus didn't talk so much about Deuteronomy 24 at first. He talked about creation. So in creation, God made man and woman and intended them to marry and in marriage to become one. And that was meant to last for life. This was God's intent. Now, the Pharisees went on to ask Jesus, then why did Moses in Deuteronomy 24 allow for divorce? Let's read that and see how Jesus responded. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? That's the passage, Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. In other words, Jesus is saying God's intent in creation was for marriage to be for life. Divorce came about because of the hardness of men's heart. Once the fall occurred, once sin entered the world, God's purpose for the world, as it were broken. We live in a broken world. And there are many things in this world that are not what God originally intended. Now, we know that. God began, of course, a mission of redemption, which would culminate in Jesus coming to redeem the lost. Ultimately, all of creation will be restored. Ultimately, all of creation will be restored. But we live in the in-between times. Redemption is ongoing. Salvation is going forward in the name of Jesus. But the world is still broken. And so sometimes things happen that were not according to the original plan of God. Divorce is one of those things. Jesus is saying, because the world is a broken place, because hurts happen, because things occur, sometimes divorce happens. And Moses allowed it. Biblically, it is allowed. But it was never what God intended. So when we see divorce today, we recognize it as a tragedy. We recognize that sometimes things happen in life. Sometimes there are hurts that can't be healed. Sometimes there are things that occur that can't be undone. We know that. So sometimes divorce occurs. We always see it as less than what God wanted to be, but also God's redemptive plan is still working. And so even where marriages have broken, God can heal hearts and heal homes and allow people to go on with their lives. So I don't believe that Jesus saying divorce is never allowed. The Bible does allow it in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Jesus agreed with that. But he said, understand, it's a falling short of God's original plan. But that's what salvation is all about, to come into a broken world and to begin to put the broken pieces back together again. So when we look at divorce today, we see it as a falling short of what we would have liked. No couple ever gets married with the intent that they will later divorce. When a divorce occurs, everybody admits it was a falling short of what was intended. It happens. We live in a world of brokenness and things occur. But even in that brokenness, God comes and he heals and he gives people second chances. And I believe that's what Jesus is saying. He said, remember the creation story. Know what the ultimate plan of God is. But also know that in a broken world, sometimes things happen that are short of God's will. God's redemptive grace is present. He allows us to be healed and to go forward. That is grace. That is the grace of God. And that is the mercy of God. And it is that we always hold in times of confusion. You know, if the world were perfect, there would never be divorce. But the world's not perfect yet. And so we know that sometimes divorce will occur. But God's grace is great, and His healing is wonderful. He allows people to go forward and their life still to be full, even if something has happened that everyone wished had not. Okay? We'll continue our study tomorrow as we continue to look at what Jesus has to say and what He does in the Gospel of Matthew. You have a great day. I'll see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study.